It begins with a smell. Not the sweet, clean smell of hay and animals, but something thicker, heavier, that clings to the back of the throat that on the evening of April 4th, 1922, three men from a small Bavarian village push open the creaking wooden door of a barn on a lonely farmstead known as Hinterkaifeck. For days, no one has seen the family who lives here. The chimney has smoked, the animals have been heard, but the yard stands empty, the windows dark. The male piles up point one of the men. A neighbor named Lorenz steps forward, calling out for Andreas Gruber, the stubborn patriarch of the farm. No answer, only the muffled sounds of restless cattle, hooves shifting on packed earth. Their eyes adjust slowly to the dim. Straw, tools, beams of rough wood. The barn feels close, oppressive. And then one man notices what looks like a pile of hay, oddly stacked in the center. That he kicks aside the straw at a human foot. A skirt, a face smashed beyond recognition. Under that heap, layered like discarded objects, are four bodies. The family, all dead for days. And somewhere in the silent house, just a few meters away, there's still more. Whoever did this did not simply kill. They moved in. They stayed. To understand the horror of Hinterkaifeck, you have to start with the place itself. In 1922, Bavaria is still reeling from the First World War. The German Empire has collapsed. The Weimar Republic is fragile and poor. Rural communities like those around the town of Schrobenhausen cling to the old life. Hard work, land, religion, and long memories. About a kilometer north of the tiny village of Grobern stands an isolated farmstead. Locals call it Hinterkaifeck, behind Kaifeck, after a nearby settlement. There's no cluster of homes around it, no streetlights, no close neighbors. Just fields, woodland, and a rough track leading from the main road. The farm belongs to Andreas Gruber, 63 years old, known in the area as a strict, often unpleasant man. Living with him is his wife, 72-year-old Kazilia. Their only surviving child, 35-year-old Victoria, has been widowed since her husband was reported missing and presumed killed in the First World War. She lives on the farm with her two children, 7-year-old Kazilia and 2-year-old Joseph. The sixth person in the house will arrive only hours before the killings. A housemaid named Maria Baumgartner, 44 years old, starting new employment after the previous maid quit under deeply unsettling circumstances. The Gruber family is not just any rural household. Their name carries a stain. Court records show that in 1915, Andreas Gruber and his daughter Victoria were convicted of an incestuous relationship. Both served prison sentences. Despite this, after their release, they returned to living under the same roof. Rumors never left them. Gossip in a village travels easily and never dies. Some locals believed that Joseph, the toddler, was not the son of Victoria's deceased husband, but the product of either continued abuse by Andreas or of a secret relationship with a neighbor, a man named Lorenz Schlittenbauer. Legal documents support that Schlittenbauer at one point acknowledged paternity, then later withdrew. By early 1922, Hinterkaifeck is a farm marked by isolation, scandal, and strained relationships with neighbors, with the village, and possibly within its own walls. The story of a massacre does not begin with blood. It begins with small disturbances, details that, on their own, might have been dismissed, but together now seem like the prelude to something watching, waiting. According to later testimony from neighbors, Andreas Gruber mentioned strange happenings in the days leading up to the murders. A set of house keys went missing. Footprints were seen in the snow, coming from a nearby forest toward the back of the farm. But, he claimed, none leading away. Inside the house, the previous maid, Crescens Rieger, had already grown terrified. In statements she later gave, she described hearing footsteps above her in the attic when she knew everyone else was asleep. She reported voices, inexplicable noises in the walls, a constant feeling of being watched. The fear became so overwhelming that she quit her job and left Hinterkaifeck only weeks before the murders, telling people she believed the place was haunted. Around the same time, a newspaper was found in the house, a Munich paper that no one in the family admitted to buying. None of the neighbors subscribed to it. Andreas asked around, but no one claimed it. It seemed to have appeared from nowhere. For those who would later study the case, these details suggested something chilling. Someone might already have been on the property, possibly living in the attic, moving through the house at night while the family slept. That conclusion is not proven, but it is one many investigators have considered based on the collected witness statements that on March 31st, 1922, it is a normal working day on the farm. At least on the surface. The new maid, Maria Baumgartner, arrives that very day, escorted by her sister. It will be her first and last night at Hinterkaifeck. According to reports, the family goes about their chores. Victoria and young Kazilia attend to household tasks, Andreas and his wife to the animals and the land. There is no record of any visitors, no known argument, no sign of panic. Sometime that evening, something draws Andreas Gruber to the barn. Perhaps a noise, a restless animal, or simply routine. We do not know. What investigators later concluded, based on the positions of the bodies, is that Andreas was likely the first to enter and the first to die. He is struck on the head with a heavy, sharp instrument, probably a mattock, a kind of farm pickaxe. The blow shatters bone. He collapses on the barn floor. One by one, someone lures the others out. Most experts believe they were called to the barn individually, perhaps under some pretext. His wife, Kazilia. Victoria. Little 7-year-old Kazilia. They walk into the dark space, expecting a chore, an explanation, a noise to investigate. Instead, they are attacked. Blow after blow is delivered to their heads and faces. Autopsy reports describe fractured skulls, broken cheekbones, gaping wounds. Victoria's head shows evidence of multiple blows. Andreas's face is almost unrecognizable. The most disturbing detail comes from the condition of the child. Young Kazilia appears to have survived her first injuries for several hours. Doctors noted tufts of her own hair clutched in her hands, as if she had torn it out in terror and pain in the house. 2 more lives are ended. Maria, the new maid, is killed in her bed in the maid's room. The youngest, Joseph, is murdered in his cot. Both are struck with the same or a similar weapon, and a shot is fired. No neighbors report hearing screams. Only the animals would have heard the sounds of bodies falling onto wooden floors and packed earth. When the killer or killers are finished, the scene is not left as one might expect. The 4 barn victims are carefully stacked, one atop another, partially covered with hay and an old door. Maria's body is hidden beneath her bedclothes. Joseph is left in his cot, his tiny body also lightly covered. What happens next is what turns this crime from a brutal killing into something far more unnerving. For the next several days, Hinterkaifeck appears strangely alive. Neighbors notice smoke rising from the chimney, suggesting that someone is stoking the farmhouse stove. A mechanic who comes to repair a machine sees no one, but hears the animals and notes that the stable seems tended. Food is found later in the kitchen that appears to have been eaten after the estimated time of the murders. Bread is sliced. Meat is taken from the pantry. According to the official investigation files, the farm dog is reported to have been tied up in the barn at some point after the killings, and then later found inside the house when the bodies are discovered. The cows are milked. The pigs are fed. For at least 3 days, maybe 4, the murderer lives on the farm with the dead, moving between the barn and the house, eating the family's food, tending their animals, while the Grubers, their daughter, their grandchildren, and their maid lie silent in the cold. Imagine the scene the neighbors walk into on April 4th, pieced together from police reports and witness statements. They come because the mail has not been collected. Young Kazilia has not appeared in school. The family misses church. The farm work stops. The postman recalls that for several days he did not see the Grubers, though the gate was open and the dog could be heard. The local community begins to worry that a small group of men, including neighbor and sometime suitor of Victoria, Lorenz Schlittenbauer, decides to check on them. They cross the yard, call out, knock. No answer. The doors are locked. They enter the barn first. The air inside is heavy. It takes only moments before their boots disturb the loose straw hiding the corpses. The sight shakes them. For bodies piled. Andreas, his wife, Victoria, and young Kazilia. Blood has seeped into the straw, dried into dark patches. Their faces bear the destruction of multiple blows. Their eyes were still intact, stare into nothing. In statements later given, Schlittenbauer's behavior will be noted as unusual by some witnesses. According to certain accounts, he enters the house alone after the discovery, unlocking doors and moving through rooms in search of the children. Some say he seems oddly composed, others that he handles the situation more decisively than anyone else. Those impressions will, in time, feed suspicions, but at this moment, all that truly matters is the unfolding horror. Inside the house, they find the maid, Maria, in her bed, her head crushed. In the child's room, they discover Joseph, his small body bloodied in his cot. There is no sign of a struggle beyond the violence of the blows. No overturned furniture, no barricaded doors. And yet, the house does not look abandoned. Bread has been recently cut. The kitchen shows evidence of use. The barn animals are fed, the cows not yet sick from neglect. Somewhere between life and death, the farm has existed in a grotesque imitation of normalcy. Police from the nearby town of Neuburg and der Donau are summoned. They arrive to a crime scene that, by modern standards, is already contaminated. Villagers have wandered through the buildings, touched things, moved objects. The officers, lacking today's forensic protocols, do their best, but critical evidence is likely trampled, lost, or altered before it can be properly preserved. In the barn, investigators examine the bodies. In the house, they search for the murder weapon. Eventually, hidden in the attic or a small space above the barn, they locate what most experts believe to be the tool used in the killings, a mattock, a heavy, bladed farm implement. The realization begins to sink in. Whoever did this did not simply strike and run. They knew the farm well enough to move through it in the dark. They stayed long enough to hide the weapon in a place the family rarely checked. They tended animals and lit fires, not out of mercy, but as part of their continued occupation of the property. The horror at Hinterkaifeck is not just the brutality of the deaths, but the intimacy of what followed. The official investigation begins immediately, but from the start it is hindered by the forensic limitations of the early 1920s and by mistakes at the scene. Photographs are taken, sketches drawn, statements collected, autopsies are carried out on the bodies by court physician Dr. Johann Baptist Ommler. In a detail that still disturbs many, the heads of all 6 victims are removed and sent to Munich for further examination, including an attempt at clairvoyant insight by spiritualists, a practice that, while not standard, was not entirely unheard of at the time. No useful information results from this. The skulls are never returned to Hinterkaifeck. During the Second World War, they are believed to have been destroyed in a bombing raid. The investigation casts a wide net. Dozens of suspects are questioned over the years. Neighbors, drifters, former workers, even members of organized criminal groups. One line of inquiry focuses on robbery. Money is found in the house, however, making a simple burglary motive less convincing. Another line of suspicion falls on Lorenz Schlittenbauer. As neighbor, as one-time acknowledged father of Joseph, and as a man with access to the property, his role draws intense scrutiny. Some neighbors claim he knew how to unlock the farm's doors from the outside. Others are troubled by his behavior, both at the discovery of the bodies and afterward. Police interrogate him multiple times. He offers explanations for his actions, including his decision to enter the house alone for fear that any surviving children might still be alive and in need of help. No conclusive evidence is found to legally tie him to the murders. He is never charged. Years later, other suspects emerge in the files. A pair of brothers with criminal histories, a man rumored to have confessed on his deathbed, war deserters passing through the area. Each theory gains a following, then collapses under the weight of contradictions and lack of proof. In 1923, the Hinterkaifeck farm buildings are demolished. During the demolition, a bloodstained panel and other items are found, but by then, they offer little new insight. A small shrine, a simple stone cross, is erected on the site. The land is eventually turned into fields. The case is revisited multiple times. In 1926, the investigation is briefly reopened. In the 1950s, police again review the files. In 2007, a group of students at the Bavarian Police Academy studies the case using modern profiling techniques. According to later reporting, they identify a likely single perpetrator based on the evidence available. But out of respect for living relatives, the name is not made public. Officially, the murders remain unsolved. For the community around Hinterkaifeck, the killings are not just a crime. They are a wound that never fully closes. In a small, tightly knit rural society, the idea that such an atrocity could occur in their midst, and that the killer could have been someone they knew, is almost unbearable. People lock their doors who never did before. Children are warned away from the woods and the old farm roads. The memory of the stacked bodies in the barn, the silent farmhouse with its tended animals, spreads through whispered stories at kitchen tables and in churchyards. The strange events before the murders, the footsteps in the attic, the missing keys, the unexplained newspaper, take on a new and darker meaning. To some, they become signs that evil was already in the house, moving quietly through the rafters. To others, they represent failures of vigilance, warnings unheeded. Even investigators are affected. Those who sifted through the body parts, who stood in that barn, who examined the shattered skulls and read the fearful testimonies of villagers, carry the images with them. Some retired officers later spoke of the case as one of the most disturbing they had ever encountered. Over time, the story of Hinterkaifeck begins to move beyond the region. It appears in crime studies, in books, in documentaries. With each retelling, the psychological horror deepens. The idea of someone lurking in a family's home for days, possibly weeks, waiting. The image of a murderer calmly feeding animals, eating meals, and sleeping under the same roof as the dead. Reports suggest that, after the demolition of the farm, locals sometimes avoided walking near the site at night. Some spoke of an oppressive feeling in the fields where the buildings once stood. Others, according to later collected anecdotes, believed the place cursed, a point where something terrible had entered and never entirely left. Hinterkaifeck is more than an old, unsolved case. It is a story that forces us to look at the darkest corners of human behavior, and at the unsettling gaps in what we can ever truly know that one was ever convicted. No confession was ever definitively verified. The skulls, which might have offered some clues to modern forensic science, were lost in another war. The farm is gone, the buildings torn down, the wood and stone carried away. Today, if you visit the area, you will find fields, a memorial cross, and the sense that something terrible once happened here, in the quiet between the trees and the sky. What makes Hinterkaifeck so deeply disturbing is not only the brutality of the murders, but the intimacy and patience they required. Someone watched this family. Someone learned their routines, their habits, their vulnerabilities. Someone, perhaps, walked the roof beams above their beds, listening to them breathe. Then, one night, that someone stepped out of the shadows and systematically destroyed an entire household. Afterward, instead of fleeing in panic, they settled into the victims' lives for several days, tending animals, eating meals, sleeping in their beds, before finally melting back into the wider world, leaving almost nothing behind but confusion and dread. We do not know who held the mattock. We do not know what thoughts passed through their mind as they stood in the barn, looking down at the bodies they had arranged. We do not know if they ever returned to the site afterward, standing at a distance in the dusk, watching as the buildings were pulled down. What we have are fragments, court records, police notes, autopsy reports, newspaper articles, the troubled recollections of neighbors, and the enduring silence of the dead. In that silence, Hinterkaifeck continues to wait, an empty farm in the dark, where the footsteps in the attic were real, and where the thing in the shadows did not pass by, but moved in. This story is based on real documented reports and eyewitness accounts.